At this time, I'm going to have John come and he's going to do the reading for us today.
Let's read two very short but powerful verses this morning. John chapter 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. John chapter 8, verse 12. Again, therefore, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in the darkness, but shall have the light of life.
John, we appreciate that reading this morning, and what could be better than that? What two verses could be any better than those? They spoke about the idea of love. They spoke about the love of God that he has even for us. Even as we are removed so many years and such a distance. And also about light. And that idea of light and walking in the light. I love that terminology. Today we are going to be looking at a miracle. I love to look at the miracles. I love to think about miracles. And you know, I hear a lot of people say they don't believe in miracles. I don't think any of us should take the position we don't believe in miracles. It's a miracle in a lot of ways that we're able to get up every morning. It's a miracle that the sun comes up. It's a miracle that the earth continues to revolve around the sun and we're not destroyed. And if things were changed just a little bit in the plan of God, we wouldn't be here at all. Now, there's a lot of different things that we see in miracles. This morning, we're going to look at one of the miracles of Jesus. We're going to look at one of the miracles that everyone was so amazed by. We're going to look at it from some individual standpoints, though, in ways that we can apply to our lives. As we struggle with everything that goes on in our lives. But we want to remember that there was a purpose for the miracles. The very first purpose of the miracles was to show the power of God. And that power of God overcomes everything. There is nothing that God is not more powerful than. And as you think about any of the miracles, the power of God is shown through Jesus Christ. Doesn't that fit so well with what John read a few moments ago? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should have life. You and I need to have that understanding of the power of God and his love for us. You know, though, the miracles also show the compassion of Jesus. Last night we were enjoying the aftermath of the wedding, and I remember somebody came up to me and they said, "What are you going to preach on tomorrow?" Says, "It's going to be late when you get home. You need to preach on something that's easy. You need to preach on something that's short." And you know what? They even gave me a scriptural reference. They said, "Preach on Jesus wept." That'll be an easy one. I said, "Well, I don't know how easy that would be." But that does show the compassion of the Savior. Isn't it amazing how that every instant throughout the Bible, when we look in the New Testament at the story of Jesus, he always did good for others. Wherever he was touched by their pain, he was touched by their problems, and he had compassion on them. And you know, there's another thing that I want you to realize about the miracles. The miracles were given to those people to help them. To help them. Jesus was compassionate and he saw the need that they had, but he wanted to fulfill that need. I want you and I, as we look at this miracle this morning, to have that same idea that Jesus is compassionate toward us, and He's there to fulfill our needs. He's there to fulfill our needs. There are times and disappointments that come to every single one of us. There are things that we don't understand, and there's things that we don't really come to grips with all the time. But we need to understand, and we need to vitalize ourselves with the idea that Jesus cares and Jesus wants to fulfill what we need. But sometimes we become so close-minded. We become people who refuse to allow His Word, to allow His love to come into us. And therefore we aren't fulfilled. We're going to look at a miracle this morning that is mentioned in all four of the Gospels. And I always look at that and I say, if every Gospel writer thought something was important enough to include it, it must be important enough for us to really give it some thought. And this morning we're going to look at a miracle that's recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But I want us, for sake of time, to go to the Mark account. And we're going to be following this account in Mark. Mark, the 6th chapter, the 30th verse is where we're going to be beginning. We often refer to this as the feeding of the 5,000. I do not think that I have ever been to a meal where they fed 5,000 people. If you read to the end of this and found that feeding of the 5,000, you'd know that it was not just the 5,000 people there. There were 5,000 men there. Wherever you find 5,000 men, I wouldn't doubt that you don't find 10,000 women. And if you find 10,000 women, I don't doubt that you don't find 20,000 children. And so the number is much, much more than just the 5,000 that we look at. But as we begin, let's pick up. And let's pick up in Mark the 6th chapter and the 30th verse. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to Him all they had done and taught. Isn't it wonderful to think about that whenever the apostles went out, whenever they did the work of the Lord, they came back and they talked to Him about it. They instructed Him in it. They let Him know what was going on. That's a great part of the learning curve. Every one of us, we are in a learning experience in our lives. Now, it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're 70 like Johnny and Phil, or if you are just a child here, you are learning. And all of us need to be people who are learning. And we need to be learning from the Master. It amazes me when I think about these men and who they were. And one of the songs that we did in Vacation Bible School was we did the 12 apostles each night. And I love that song. Hey, boys and girls that are here, how many of you know that song? How many of you remember the song that we sang? Well, let's sing it for everybody now. Jesus called them one by one, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Then came Philip, Thomas too, Matthew and Bartholomew, James the one they call the less, Simon also Thaddeus, the 12th apostle Judas made. Jesus was by him betrayed. Yes, Jesus called them. Yes, Jesus called them. Yes, Jesus called them, and they all followed Him. But that is such a learning song. And in that song, we get to name the 12 apostles. Now, I hate to admit this to you, but when somebody tells me, can you name the 12 apostles? That's the way that I name them. I go back to that song, whether I sing it out loud or not. I sing it in my mind as I tell them who they are. These met with Jesus. They gathered around with him. They ate with him. They talked with him. In verse 31, then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Come with me. Come with me. One of the most tragic things in the story that Jesus tells of the young ruler, the rich young ruler, is the fact that he lost an opportunity to be with the Lord. He went away sorrowful because great were his possessions. And what he missed out on is exactly what Jesus gave to those apostles that were there. And so now Jesus tells them, come and go with me. And we're going to a quiet place and get some rest. This morning I've gotten up at about 5 o'clock every morning, 5 to 5:30. I go out and I sit in the sunroom. And at our house, the sun comes up right into the sunroom. And I have to say, I have really enjoyed sitting there and just watching the sunrise. I know that every single one of us are busy. But take some time. Go to a quiet place and get some rest. You know, you can rest without sleeping. Maybe clear your mind, clear your thoughts. Maybe even think about nothing for a little while. You know, I try to do that. And I know y'all are going to say, well, that shouldn't be very hard. But we have to do that. We have to use that time. In verse 32, so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Do you ever feel like as though you're a sheep without a shepherd? Do you ever feel like as though that you're lost and struggling? Do you ever feel like as though you don't know which direction to go in? I went to visit my brother-in-law, Tony, who had knee surgery yesterday. And he lives in a place that I'm not real familiar with, and he's just moved there. And I've got the GPS out, and I'm following the GPS, and it turns me down this road. And the name of this road is Patton Road. The NES electrical people had the road blocked. And so you had to detour around it. Well, every time that I would detour around where they were working on the power line, this thing would put me back in a loop. And so literally, I was driving the same loop till I got back there. I felt like a sheep that had lost its way. I finally had to decide I'm going to look at the numbers that are on these things and try to figure out how to get there. And it worked, but it didn't work the way that I wanted to. Lost like sheep without a shepherd. Sheep are strange animals to me. I've never really owned a sheep. Never really raised any sheep. But it always amazes me how that they seem to be something that needs someone to take care of them. Needs someone to oversee them. That's what Jesus did for the people that were there. And now, even as Jesus is tired, even as Jesus is physically worn out, even as he's been searching for a place to rest so that he can be with his apostles, the people have flocked to him, and the sheep have followed him. But the greatest thing in this passage is when it said that he had compassion on them. There's 3 points that I want us to get today. And the very first one of those points is one that we're going to be talking about for a few moments, and it deals with compassion. As we look at this story of the feeding of the 5,000, I want you to come to the realization that Jesus never leaves us hungry. And in reality, it's because he cares. Jesus never leaves us hungry. Jesus never leaves us empty. All of these people who he had really been trying to get away from so that he could take just a little while to rest, they followed him alongside. They've looked at him in the boat, and when that boat lands, they come there, and they stop there. And Jesus begins to teach them. There is a real correlation between the idea of filling someone mentally and spiritually and physically. And that is exactly what we see in this story. Jesus is teaching them. Jesus is healing them. Jesus is doing whatever needs to be done right there. Because you see, Jesus never leaves us hungry. And he is always there for us. In verse 35, by this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Now the problem that arises here is it gets late in the day. No one is eating. They've been listening to Jesus as he's preached. They've been watching as Jesus healed others. They've been basking in the compassion of the Lord. But they are in a solitary place. They're away from stores. They're away from anywhere that they might have called home. And so now they are all beginning to be hungry. And Jesus tells his apostles, he says, feed them. Feed them. Feed them. So often when you and I are faced with a problem, and maybe that problem is feeding others. Maybe that problem is feeding others spiritually. We react just like the apostles did. Said, Lord, how do you expect us to do that? Look at all these people. Maybe there's 20,000 people here. There's 5,000 men here. How can we feed them? It would take more money than what we made in a whole year. And you know, Lord, I didn't want to mention this to you, but since I've been following you, I haven't made a penny. I had to quit fishing. I left my boats. I left my tax collector status. And I'm following you. Does that not sound like us? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? I can't help but go back to Vacation Bible School, and every year I think to myself, how are we going to do it? How are we going to feed everybody? And I can't say enough about the people who go in there and fix in the kitchen and take care of that. I can't say enough about the people who go out there and grill on the grills. I can't say enough about the people who clean up, who decorate, who do everything to make it a success. And you know, sometimes people like me, we wonder if it's going to work out. But so many people put so much energy, put so much of their time, their effort into making it a success. And to me, it was a tremendous success. You see, the apostles, they were sort of like me. How are we going to do this, Lord? We don't have the money. We don't have the resources. We don't even have anywhere to go and get it. I can't make it appear. Don't you know that Jesus was disappointed in them? And then in verse 38, how many loaves do you have, he asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fishes. Now, if you read all the accounts, you realize that there was a boy whose mother had prepared him to go on this, and she had packed him a little bit of a lunch, and then it was 5 little loaves of bread and 2 little fish. Most scholars think that those fish were almost like what you and I would call minnows. And literally what they did is they salted those down so that they would stay where they would be edible, and then they placed them in there, and they weren't very big. But they were enough for that boy to take that day. And now the apostles find that that's the only food there. And Jesus says, how much do you have? How much do you have? 5 and 2. 5 and 2. In verse 39, then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Now let's take the picture here. Jesus tells them, separate everybody out. I want some groups of hundreds, some groups of 50s, and all across those mountainsides, all across those pastures, all across that area, people are sitting in groups. And Jesus takes those 5 loaves and 2 fishes and places them in a basket. He gave thanks for it. Isn't it wonderful to think about that when we sit down to a meal and we give thanks for that meal, that we're doing what the Lord had done. We're doing what the Lord had done. I love having a blessing. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I always do it. Sometimes getting a rush, sometimes you're back in a pickup truck eating a sandwich, sometimes you don't do everything that you need to do, but I do want you to know that I think it's an important thing to do to show everyone the way in which that you have an appreciation, a thankfulness. And they blessed the food. They were thankful for it. And now they begin to distribute. And they distribute the food out of the basket that the Lord has blessed. And in verse 42, they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. What a massive miracle to feed all of those people with just a few items. Now you remember that we've already talked about one thing that we wanted to take this morning was that Jesus never leaves us hungry. The second thing I want you to realize about this miracle is that Jesus can take a little and make it a lot. How insignificant do we think about ourselves sometimes? How insignificant do we think about our abilities? And we may say, I can't do this, I can't do that. Said, I can't reach out to the world. Let me tell you that those 12 apostles that Jesus called, none of them thought they were going to change the world the morning that Jesus came and called them. the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus told him, said, come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Isn't it amazing to think about the transformation that went on in their lives in what is a relatively short length of time? That they could become the people who spread the story of Jesus, of his death, burial, and resurrection. That they could be the ones who administered to people because they were willing to follow. Let me tell you what holds you and I back. Is so often we're not willing to follow. And sometimes we don't think that we have a lot to offer. But let me tell you, Jesus can take a little and make it a lot. And he can do that in our lives. Do you realize that if I have just a spark of faith, Jesus can turn that spark into a rampaging fire? Whether we can have a faith that allows us to influence our family, those that work with us, our church, everyone that we come in contact, because Jesus took just a little of me and made it a lot. What a wonderful thing on that day when they sat down in crowds of 50 and 100, that Jesus took that very meager meal and he fed everyone there. The third thing that I want you to take from this lesson: with Jesus, nothing is wasted. It said when they got done eating, they picked up all the pieces that were left, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of food. 12 basketfuls. And so some of them were able to take food home with them. Maybe the apostles even took some food on with them where that they could use it, they could have it. But understand that in our lives, when Jesus comes into it, there is absolutely nothing wasted. You know, we look at this concept of all these people, and that they ate until they were filled, because there was plenty of food there. There was 12 baskets that was even left over. They ate until they were filled. And this morning, I want to ask you the question, are you filled? I really want you to be filled not only from a physical standpoint, and I love being filled from a physical standpoint. You can tell that by looking at me. But I want you to be filled from a spiritual standpoint. As we close out, I want you to turn to Philippians, the 1st chapter. And in the Philippians, the 1st chapter, we're going to begin to read there in the 9th verse. Philippians 1, verses 9 through 11. This is the Apostle Paul as he teaches. He says, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best, and may be pure and blameless until the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." This morning, do you ever think about the idea of being filled with the fruit of righteousness? Of being filled with the love of Jesus Christ? Of being filled with the compassion that he had for us, and now, as we imitate that compassion for others? Have you ever thought about being filled with the forgiveness that the Lord had? Have you ever thought about being filled with that holiness that he had? That righteousness. That's what he wants to give us. Not just a meal. Not just to feed us in a multitude one time, but to continue to feed us spiritually every day. You see, Jesus went to the cross and died that you and I might have life. What could be more filling than life itself? Than life itself. And he said, not just this life that is now, but that you might have eternal life. Because what you've done is you put him on in baptism, and your sins washed away and arise as a new creature. One who belongs to the Savior. This morning, the Lord extends a miracle to you. It's a miracle of his death, burial, and resurrection. And he wants you to be the one who partakes of it. If we can help in any way, won't you come as we stand and sing?